Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize Congressman Russell for his work on this legislation. This is the Iran Terror Finance Transparency Act. And I think we should all reflect on the reason for this resolution, one of the reasons, and that is that since the Obama administration sealed the nuclear deal with Iran, Iran has been on a bit of a tear. It has accelerated its missile program at the request of President Rouhani. It has taken an additional American hostage. It has stepped up the slaughter in Syria. Days after that agreement was finalized, you had Iranian rockets firing 1,500 yards off the aircraft carrier Truman. And just yesterday, Iran detained 10 U.S. sailors, which was not appreciated, especially coming on the aftermath of firing those rockets near the Truman. Now, we're all relieved to learn this morning that the sailors have been released. Yet, in what could be a matter of days, Iran will cash in with $100 billion plus in sanctions relief, of money which is now in escrow. And I'm sure it's occurred to many of us that if Iran behaves this way now, in a few days when it gets its hands on this bankroll, especially given the fact that that money is going to the IRGC, not to the Iranian people, what other actions are we going to see from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps? We had a story this weekend, front page in the weekend edition of the Wall Street Journal. And the headline of that story is "Nuclear Deal Fuels Iran's Hardliners." Iran's hardliners will be the biggest winner out of this. The Revolutionary Guards, the same radical forces that held these 10 U.S. sailors, that force and their proxies control many of the industries that will benefit from the influx of hard currency and new investment, whether it's energy or construction. They control it. This ICBM program, they control it. And just as many of us warned prior to this deal about the appetite for enforcement once this deal gets underway, there is no pushback from the administration on this. Since the nuclear deal, Iran has tested 2 ballistic missiles. Now, that is in violation of a UN Security Council resolution. This administration's response was to announce and then abandon new sanctions within a very short time frame, apparently to not offend the supreme leader, not to risk its flawed nuclear deal. When it comes to Iran, we need a policy of more backbone, not more backing down, because it was not supposed to be this way with this deal. In announcing the nuclear deal, President Obama claimed that American sanctions on Iran for its support of terrorism, its human rights abuses, its ballistic missile program will continue to be fully enforced. Those were the President's words, and just after that was Secretary Kerry's argument testifying before the Foreign Affairs Committee. This legislation is a first step in holding the administration to these commitments. And under this bill, before the President can lift sanctions on a particular person or bank or company to implement the nuclear deal, he must certify that their removal is related to Iran's nuclear program alone. That's who we were told would be getting the sanctions relief, not those tied to terrorism, not those tied to Iran's ballistic missile or other illicit weapons programs that were under sanction from the UN resolutions. When the Treasury Department sanctioned Bank Mali in 2007, it noted that the institution had provided banking services to the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps and the Quds Force. The Quds Force is in charge of assassinations outside of Iran. As we all know, the Revolutionary Guards have committed acts of terrorism and committed those missile tests that we just recently saw. Why then is this bank set to receive sanctions relief in the coming days? And Bank SEPA, one of Iran's largest banks, will be another big winner of sanctions relief in the coming days. When that bank was designated, and that was January of 2007, then Treasury Undersecretary Stuart Levy noted with this argument, Bank SEPA is the financial linchpin of Iran's missile procurement network. What we have to think about here is there's one reason why a state develops ICBMs. It's to deliver a nuclear payload. It's to deliver a weapon. So, he says it is the financial linchpin and has actively assisted Iran's pursuit of missiles capable of carrying weapons of mass destruction. With Iran's ballistic missile program advancing, indeed, its president, Rouhani, just called for the program to be accelerated. That's what we have in the face of this agreement. We should not be letting this bank off the ropes, opening it for business from Europe to Asia. To be clear, those Iranian banks and individuals not supporting terrorism, not supporting ICBMs, they can be delisted. That was what was originally represented in this Congress. But not those threatening our national security. Not those making threats to us while the Ayatollah is saying death to America, death to Israel. That is what this legislation does, and it's the policy that the administration explained to this House. I reserve the balance.